Significant traction since making his announcement that he's going for HD 54?
Yes, sir.
House of Delegates District 54. He's just spent about 45 minutes with us, and we're going to chitter chatter what is good with his life and his campaign, and we'll open it up to questions today. So if you have questions for a gentleman that has all the qualifications to represent us in Richmond, put them in the feed and I will relay it live on air. We're live on every social media platform known to mankind. We often have media watching the show. If you want to ask him a question, we can certainly relay it to him as well. J-Dubs, how you feeling over there? You feeling good? Okay, fantastic. Twitter, LinkedIn, YouTube, Spotify, iTunes, Apple Podcasts, the Fountain app, Instagram, Snapchat, TikTok, all welcome to the program. Bellamy Brown is in the house. Bellamy Brown is in the house. J-Dubs, I'm in your hands, my friend. Guys, welcome to the I Love CVille show. My name is Jerry Miller. It's an absolute pleasure to connect with you guys on a network that has absolutely gone bananas from a reach, viewership, and listenership standpoint. We have conversations that matter and long form on this show. Institutional memory and the network to talk about those conversations that matter on this network. And today's program is presented by our friends at Castle Hill. Their 231 Festivals this Saturday. It's June 10th. We heard right before this show that 600 or 700 people are going to be in attendance here. This might be a fantastic opportunity for Bellamy Brown to meet a lot of people because we know his competitor is doing something different that day. So he's got a great little venue right here at Castle Hill on June 10th. We're going to talk Bellamy Brown, his campaign, and everything that he's doing special in this community in T-minus 10 seconds. Judah Wickower is the director. This man is A-plus people. J-Dubs, I sincerely mean that. If you could, studio camera, and then the two-shot on front of the program, Bellamy Brown. Que pasa? How are you?
I'm hanging in there.
You're grinding, aren't you?
I am, very much so.
Give us a snapshot into a day in the life of Bellamy Brown, where like wake up, like the routine, when you go to bed, and the grind.
I don't know if there's necessarily a routine. I think every day is different. Everything presents a different challenge or something, within the campaign that needs to be done. So, like last night, we had a rally over at the Vault, put on by my good friend Bill Atwood. Got home late from that and crashed. Most of the time, I'm just out knocking on doors, meeting folk, and hearing about the concerns within the district. And that's been pretty helpful and informative to just be on the ground. And at this point, I got in late. It was kind of this is a grassroots, deal, but we've gotten a lot of traction, and so, I'm happy with that.
Door knocking is a unique animal, and one of my favorite things about door knocking, I've actually done some volunteer door knocking in years past, is there's no more grassroots effort than a stranger going to someone's house, knocking on their door, and wanting to talk politics. I mean, that is the definition of grassroots. People respond very differently in door knocking scenarios. First, put that in perspective for us, and then the second part of the question is, what have been some of the common themes you've been hearing from the folks while doing this grassroots effort?
Sure. So for me, I ran in 2019 for city council, did some work on the oversight board for, the past few years. And so people generally know who I am. They see my signs all around. And I gotta give kudos to Jennifer Eberline and Marlise Kortmulder for that. They're the ones who came up with that, with the idea, and it's, everybody loves it. And so, I'm grateful to both of them on that. But they see my face, and all the conversations have been, primarily good. We do have some where it's like, I'm not really interested or what have you, and that's par for the course. We're not going to get every vote, but it's been good, and I'm a people person, and I can have conversations really about the needs of our district. Because for me, it's not about politics; it's about bringing practical solutions to our district overall. And so I'm happy to get an idea. And you can't get an idea of what's going on in the district unless you go and knock on doors and talk to people. You may have folk that are representative, but their representation may differ from what what's actually on the ground and everything. So.
I want to give you props. Bill McChesney's watching the program. He says, I have a Bellamy Brown sign in my yard, and I'm proud to have it hanging in the house.
Yes.
If you want a question or comment for Bellamy Brown, put it in the feed. I'll relay it live on air. I've been impressed with your campaign because I've seen Bellamy Brown signage and branding in neighborhoods of all types of backgrounds.
Yes.
You have Bellamy Brown signage in affluent neighborhoods.
Yes.
You have Bellamy Brown signage in middle-class neighborhoods.
Yes.
You have Bellamy Brown signage in working-class neighborhoods.
Yes.
Put that in perspective for us, what that means to you. It seems to me you are very much a candidate of the people.
Yes. Oh, absolutely, 100%. This isn't about me at all. I wasn't intending to run, this cycle, and just got the push to get out there, and so I did. As I said, came in, last out of 5 to get in the race. I'm now one of 3, and the people are very much responsive to my campaign, to our campaign, and they've again, whereas in 2019, when I came back home, folk didn't necessarily, I guess, know my name as well. There are some folk that still don't know, but that base has increased, and so. It's been positive across the board, and I think when we are looking at a representative for our district, we have to be open to representing everyone in the district. And so, for me, that's what it's about.
What's the number one issue?
So
HD 55, the number one issue seems to be abortion. And I'm going to ask you about HD 55. You had one of the most hilarious posts I've ever read on social media. And you know the one I'm going to allude to, where it was the Albemarle County Democratic picnic. I think you said this is going to be a smidge awkward or something like that. Well, but I want to highlight you first.
Sure.
In HD 54,
yes.
A completely different district, is it gun violence or is it abortion, reproductive rights?
From what I've heard in 54, and we've just had a couple of shootings here locally, or a few days ago, or what have you, and that is a big concern. Women's rights, reproductive rights, is there as well. But we can't negate the fact that in this particular district, people are concerned about gun violence, bullets coming through their homes, what's happening to kids in the black and brown demographic, which has an effect on the overall community. So we can't deny that, but absolutely, women's rights, women's reproductive rights is right up there as well.
How has the gun violence has it lessened? It's certainly not in the news cycle as prominently.
Yes, and so so for a while there was a lull, and I was like, all right, we're things are turning the corner, but I hear from folk who at the dairy market and what have you, there were still shootings and things happening within that spectrum that weren't really advertised as much. So overall, again, there's still work to be done. I think even in Richmond, at the graduation, these are young folk. And what we found is between 13 and 21, that's that space where some of these things are taking place. But we also have to look at what are the factors that got us there, because this is a collective deal. It's not just, these kids are out here, shooting up each other. There are other factors from a policymaking perspective and what have you, community perspective that factor into that as well.
How can we utilize policy to keep our streets safer?
Sure. I mean, I think that's a collaborative effort. Working with Chief Kotches, Chief Longo, and Chief Reeves. Here locally, I think when we look at the crime footprint, we have folk coming from Madison, Green, out from Nelson, from Waynesboro, from Fluvanna, all coming here, and apparently Charlottesville is more of a, or has been, or is more of a space to where, in guns in particular, some of those can be offloaded here just because of the nature of how some of the relationships in the past in policing have been affected. But I think that Chief Kotches and again Chief Reeves and Chief Longo are pulling together some avenues for trying to change that direction. And again, it's not going to happen overnight, but that's Yeah, that's where it is. I mean, we really have to also look at, what are the alternatives that we can provide for these kids when it comes to, job training, when it comes to, some of these life skills that need to be, implemented. That's a community effort. That's a collective effort. And as far as a policymaking perspective, I think, so when I grew up here, we had alternatives to go to, summer camps and what have you. Those things have been pulled out over that time frame, and so we have to, and that's the policy making aspect, and so we have to put that back to really kind of turn the corner.
How do you think policing has changed under the new tenure of Chief Michael Kachis from the previous tenure of Chief Brackney? I mean, it seems, this is just one man's opinion,
Sure.
it seems a much more engaged department within the community. The brand equity or the image of the department seems to me to be way more positive than it previously was a couple years ago. And Kachis just went into this game being like, I'm going to be transparent, guys.
Yeah.
I'm an open book.
Yeah. For me, when I was on the oversight board, one of the concerns was that we would have community-oriented policing. There's a lot of the community who are supportive of some of the practices and policies that have taken place, but there are still some folk who have, concerns, and we have to address those concerns. But I think it'll take place over time. I don't know what month he's in at this point, but there still has to be time for those things to be implemented. And I think he is doing a good job of being out there in the community and really talking to folk across the board to really find out what the needs are and how we can best work policing and community relations together.
You got John Blair on LinkedIn. Hello, John. Ginny Hu on Twitter, watching the show. See the folks at the weekly newspaper on the program as we speak right now. If you have questions, put them in the feed. I see a couple questions coming in. I will relay them on air very shortly. I saw you on social media at the opening of the Tonsor League, and
Yes.
I loved it.
Yes.
I see you on social media at the Black Professionals Network at the
Yes.
Ridley on West Main.
Yeah.
I've been extremely impressed with your outreach within the Black and Brown community
Yeah.
in rallying the community
Yeah.
around potentially the issues that are currently at hand.
Sure.
Talk to us about that effort.
This is my community. This is where I've grown up here. I am the only candidate in this race who is a Charlottesville native, born and raised here, gone through the public schools. Obviously, most of that time I've spent in the Black community, so I am part of the community. So for me, it's really trying to represent us as best as possible. I know that there are some folk who have relationships or claim relationships in that space, but unless you've lived in the Black community and I've been what do you call it? I've looked suspicious by police.
You've been
before.
profiled.
Yes.
Yeah.
And that's
You told us
something-
that story. If memory serves correct from a previous interview, it was in Northern Virginia.
Correct, Fairfax County.
Yeah.
And that's those are things that you just can't. You just have to live it. You just have to know it, like day in and day out. And so I make it a point. I know that some folk don't necessarily agree with some of the things that Dr. Bellamy has done or what have you. There were times where I didn't agree with certain things, but what I see on the ground right now is that he's doing a lot in the Black community, specifically in the lower income space, and they're trying to help mitigate against some of the gun violence and things like that. So yeah, I'm going to champion that work. I'm going to champion the work across the board. We need to have more Black representation here locally, and the Black Professional Network is doing a great job at that. We obviously have folk in the older generation that are in the NAACP and what have you, and so my vision, my hope is to try to galvanize all that together to build some Black political power here locally, because quite frankly, when we've gone to these forums, when we go to some of these places and we see what the bar is for elected officials to come in and ingratiate themselves, it's really low in the Black community, and we need to raise that bar up if we wanted to get some things seriously done.
Well said. Well said. You started that answer to that question by saying some folks say within the Black community here. I don't want to infer. I would say that was potentially mentioned with Ms. Coulson.
Sure.
Your competition here.
Sure.
This is a race.
Yeah.
You're an incredibly competitive guy. Talk to us about what separates you first from Katrina Coulson.
So here's the thing. Within this race, from the start to where we are now, there has been this narrative of deep roots from the Coulson campaign in this community, and I have challenged that throughout.
You have.
The last time we just recently had a Martha Jefferson Neighborhood Association, and it came up again, and it's quiet at that point. But I later went to a table and spoke with one of the residents there, and she knew seemingly more about my family history and the Taylor side, the Fairfax Taylor side, the James T.S. Taylor side, than I did. And there is apparently a Taylor Walk in the A Street community. There's Taylor Street that's named after my family. Those are deep roots. My great-grandfather is buried over there in Maplewood Cemetery. The concern that I have, and I don't have it with me. Oh, actually, I do. With regard to Ms. Coulson's campaign, is that in 2018, with the Charlottesville Tomorrow article, she specifically says, "I was born and raised on military bases around the world. My parents and extended family are all from Virginia, Scottsville, Fredericksburg, Stanton." There are a number of other things, or a couple of other things. When we look at a flyer that she sent out to voters, saying that she's the only candidate with recent experience standing up to Republicans' extreme agenda. Well, this is a district that is 80+% Democrat. Where is this Republican extreme agenda? There's also this deal of, adopted a $15 minimum wage for all school employees. Well, that was a Dr. Haas's request, and the Board of Visitors are the ones who granted that. So these are, when we're talking, and you said we'll get into the 55th, but when we're talking about misleading voters, those are definitive examples. And what I've heard across the board from Republican and Democrat, we don't want people who are going to mislead us. We want practical solutions. We want folk that are going to get in there and get the job done, and that's what we're looking for. We see the outcome of what misleading voters has taken place in the 55th district. I come at this not from a candidate perspective, but as a resident of the 54th district, looking at who would represent me. And the same thing when I was on the oversight board. Nobody wanted to step up to the plate and say, hey, there's some problems within the Charlottesville Police Department, and those problems are affecting the greater community. Somebody has to stand up and raise the red flag. This is me standing up and raising the flag on this particular issue, because I don't believe that we need, George Santos type of leaders for our district.
Katrina Coulson has been funded heavily by one Sonia Smith.
Correct.
I mean, I'm talking, she's...
Oh, I know.
I know you know. I don't think the viewers and listeners realize.
Well, I'll tell you.
Yeah,
so our last reporting cycle, I came in at the bottom of the totem pole, 13 grand. So if you guys want to donate, we can talk about that later.
Sure.
Dave Norris came in at 28 grand. Katrina Coulson, 110 grand.
Yeah, that's substantial difference.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And 40 of that, came from Ms. Smith. And so, it is what it is. There are things that take place behind the scenes that the public doesn't necessarily get to see, but that's where we are. And I've spoken to some other folk who are like, you know what, money doesn't always matter. These mailers don't always matter because some of the voters don't get it. It's really connecting to folk. But that is a substantial difference, and the voters have to take stock of that. Some care, some don't, but that's where things are.
$42,350 from Sonia Smith.
Yeah.
She is legitimately, or has legitimately funded Sally Hudson's current seat in the House of Delegates, and is funding Sally's campaign for state senate against Creed Eats. Sonia Smith, behind the scenes, is a rainmaker along with her husband. Do we need finance reform for these campaigns? If a race like this that is a couple steps above a local, this is a local race here.
Correct.
This is a local race here.
Correct.
$42,350 is a third of her fundraising.
Sure.
Do we have to have some kind of cap?
I think, yeah, absolutely. And there is.
We talked Dominion influencing races. Correct. How about the Smith, Michael and Sonia influencing races?
Well, I think, and there is talk about making a cap or campaign finance reform at the state level, because there is none currently. And I think yeah, absolutely. But at the same token, if you're like my campaign and we're grassroots and we're getting out there and we're knocking on doors and we're doing things despite all of that, there is still opportunity there. So money doesn't always necessarily guarantee a victory, and that's been shown even in the Northern Virginia race. So we're just going to continue to go out and do what we have to do on behalf of the people, across the board. As you mentioned, affluent, middle class, low income, across the board.
Dave Norris, what separates you from Dave Norris? I believe his campaign is literally watching you right now. If you want to put that lower third up, what separates you from Dave Norris?
I think there's a lot. Obviously, one of the challenges that I have with the housing affordability deal is this premise that it's housing across the board, when primarily it's been the public housing space that he's been operating in. Everybody doesn't necessarily, and it's not to say that public housing is bad, but everybody doesn't necessarily want to live in public housing. So when we're talking about housing affordability across the board, and a lot of those issues will happen at the state level, at the local level with city council and what have you, with zoning and what have you, we have to be honest about that and really look at a full spectrum from the lower income all the way up to those who can afford it, which, quite frankly, here we see that home prices have gone through the roof. And 60% of most of the new home prices are costs. And that comes into play with regard to how permits get done and what have you, and inflation and interest rates and things like that. I have my experience is a lot more. Dave has obviously been mayor over a decade ago. My experience in local government has been more recent. I think that, again, I am the only candidate in this race who's born and raised here. I'm the only candidate who has military service, U.S. Marine Corps veteran, honorable service. I'm the only candidate with a business background, and I look at things from a practical perspective, not a political perspective, to be able to get things done. And, I believe I represent a greater swath of our community, of our district, than Mr. Norris does.
You should highlight your family's history.
Yes, yeah. So
this is pretty cool.
Yeah. So in 2019 when I ran, so the city did a proclamation, gave it to my grandmother about my great uncle James T.S. Taylor. He was one of 240 black soldiers that fled the Confederacy here and went to fight for the Union, came back and became one of the first 24 black men elected in Virginia at the start of Reconstruction. I didn't know that. I didn't focus on that aspect at the time, but a couple of friends asked me would I be the first black delegate, and so I did more research. Come to find out, his father, Fairfax Taylor, was a slave in Berryville, purchased himself out of slavery, came down here, and he was instrumental in the separation of the two First Baptist churches, the one on Park and the one on Main, because at the time, the white folks sat on the bottom, the free blacks sat on top, and they were overruled in some spaces, and that wasn't okay with him. And so he started arguing for black liberation. That's why we have, again, the First Baptist Church on Main, and they, I believe there's some family, photos and things in there with regard to my family. And then again, over on Taylor Street, that's named after them. Doing some more digging, I found out that his mother, my fifth generation grandmother, Grace, was put into slavery at 15 years old, was forced to have babies every 2 years. So she was making property. She wasn't making babies from the standpoint of slavery. She was making property every 2 years. She had 8 babies, died at 45 in slavery. So 30 years of her life, that's what she was doing. And the annotation on her obituary was that she was a good servant, well loved by her mistress and her family, and there was something else. But that shows, our country and where we've come from, and that lineage really, like when I started to connect those dots, from where I did exclusive of that, where I was in politics, in business, on my own, and then to tie this together, because I was doing this, nobody else in my family immediate family is in this space. I got to go back to the 1800s to find these two individuals, my grandfather Fairfax and my great uncle James T.S., to find out who I'm most like. And it was like, as soon as that came on, it was like there was just, I don't know, it just gives goosebumps and what have you. And I will give credit to, there's a UVA third year, Emily Miller, who did a research project on my grandfather in 2022, and that's how I found out.
How did you guys connect? How'd you find out about that project? This is awesome.
Well,
I mean, that's like a super in-depth, like Ancestry.com DNA swab. It's
yes.
basically what that is.
Yeah. Well, because there was something missing. I was like, the question that I had in my mind, I'm like, all right, there's this focus on James T.S. that the city did a proclamation. What about Fairfax? It felt like there was something missing. And so I started to do more research on that, found her article online. Emily, if you're listening, thank you. And it just opened up a whole new deal. And so there is a book called Keeping the Faith that's written about the First Baptist Church on Maine, and it tells that whole history in that particular space. So like that, it's just, I don't know, it still gives me goosebumps. My great uncle, when he was when he was representing our area, he argued for suffrage, he argued for public schools, and those are obviously the similar things that I'm arguing for. So this is in my bloodline. My mom passed away in 2019. And my great-grandmother, my grandmother's mother, passed away, I believe, in 2021. And so when I told her that I was doing this and carrying on the family legacy, like she just lit up. And she actually, came out and voted with me on the first day.
I saw the photo.
Yeah,
that's awesome.
That's my lady. That's my heart. She's a calm, kind spirit. But she's, loving and in the stead of my family lineage, like that's who we are. We're just, out to serve others, out to love on folk and really do things, for the greater good. So
you got a primary that is 12 days away.
Yeah.
I mean, we're less than 2 weeks from the Democratic primary that's going to determine this race.
Yes.
Put it in perspective, sleepless nights, how you continue to make this. I mean, 12 days away.
Yeah, I'm grinded, man. I mean, I got my face mask so I can go out here under this cloud of smoke. I mean, I spoke to a guy who's actually supporting my case. So the Collective PAC. The Collective PAC is a PAC that specifically seeks to place black candidates in public office at the local, state, and federal level, are arguing for black issues, black liberation, and the whole nine. I was speaking with a gentleman from the Collective PAC, I guess 2 days ago. He's up in New Jersey, and he's like, the pictures don't do it justice. I had friends in Northern Virginia who were posting pictures with regard to the smoke, and I'm like, wow. And I come out this morning, I'm like, wow. So it's trickling down, and so, but I'm gonna still put on my face mask, get out there, grind it out, because things still need to be done. And that's really what it's about. If there are supporters who support my campaign, who like my campaign, what I'm about, I'd be happy to have your support and knocking on these doors. I'm doing the majority of it, but I'd be happy to have that support. And I think that's really what it boils down to. We've done a lot of interviews. We'll do some more. Got things in place. This is definitely a grassroots, bare bones, type of campaign, but we're effective. We're scrappy and we're getting things done. And I think that's what'll carry it out. We'll just continue to bang on doors and talk to folk. And we have one more forum left on June 13th, the Black Empowerment Coalition. But at this point, it's really getting folk out and getting in their face. So.
Johnny Ornalis just shared the show. The mayor of McIntyre said the First Baptist Church back then was at the corner of 2nd and Jefferson Street. Little history right there from the mayor of McIntyre. Multiple media outlets watching you here, Candidate Brown, on this program. Let me throw this question to you. This campaign is going to be pretty tight. I mean, you got 3 candidates here that have some name recognition. You have tremendous grassroots support, and as you've said, you've done the work with the Police Civilian Review Board. You ran for 2019 with City Council. People know your name here.
Yes.
When this is said and done and people go to vote on the 20th,
yes, give
them a message. Because I think this is really going to be a really tight race.
Well, yeah. Do
you think?
We'll go. I don't know. I'm hearing a lot of positive things, but I'll take it as it'll be a tight race. And this is what I'll say. Again, most folk know, as a chairman of the Police Oversight Board, what I went through publicly, the attacks publicly, for doing the right thing. And it was proven that I did the right thing for the betterment of our community. If you remember, we did an interview prior to, and you were like, how's this election going to play out? I gave you my thoughts. I didn't know that I would be as involved in that particular space, but that's how it played out. And so I stood up for our community. I'll stand up for our district, and I did it with grace, under pressure. And now we have a Police Civilian Oversight Board that is the leader in the Commonwealth. We have investigatory power. We have subpoena power. And other localities are coming here to look at us to see how we're doing things. Chief Koch has rightfully stated that oversight and policing don't have to be at odds. They can be they can work well together. And there are folk who don't like the police who appreciate what the Oversight Board has done. There are folk who do like the police that appreciate what the Oversight Board has done. And I think that's a mechanism that should be presented throughout the Commonwealth as a whole, because I believe that there is significant value in it.
Stephanie Jones has got a comment for the candidate. I live in the district. Please, Jerry, ask this candidate what he's hearing on public schools and what he, if any, can do about the performance in these schools.
Sure. I mean, I think at this point, public school funding is obviously something that is significant and that is needed. We have 1,100 public schools within the Commonwealth, both rural and urban, that need updating, that need funding. And we have to support our teachers. The budget still hasn't been completed, to my knowledge, and we really have to leave it to the professionals to help navigate these spaces. But again, a lot of it comes down to the funding issue that's needed. And quite frankly, Albemarle County is still navigating through the collective bargaining space. We have to support our teachers, across the board, our teachers, students, and staff across the board. So that's what I'm about, and I think again the funding aspect will be, I guess, the strongest deal that we can do to bring forth here. When we look at some of the issues that are coming out of Richmond with things like the optional AP history course, that's a wedge issue. For what? For what purpose? To get people riled up for no reason. That's parents don't have to force their kids to take that class. So we got to get away from this space of creating school systems as a war zone, because that's essentially, okay, maybe that's the war zone is strong, but as a battle zone, because that's essentially what politicians have done. We got to step out the way, provide funding for our teachers and students and staffs, and let them do their jobs effectively.
Kelsey, this is a pointed question here. Will the candidate answer or offer insight on Albemarle County's performance? His opponent is a school board member right now, and if you look at some of these performances in the classroom, it's just not matching up to the standards we want as parents.
Sure, absolutely. And again, I think I believe the staffing issue is a problem, and we have to, a lot of it comes down to the capital, to the funding. We need to fund avenues that are going to increase, these performance metrics. If you don't have the funding in place, if you don't have the opportunities in place for teachers and staff to help increase these metrics, it's going to create problems. And you also obviously have folk that are in low-income poverty community. We got to address those issues. Let's just take the city space for instance. When you got kids that are coming across, got to come from Prospect over to, let's say, Lugo McGinnis, cross over Hardy Drive, and they got beefs going on and things like that. Well, you got to help navigate those issues. You got to find out what are the core issues that are going on there. So it's not just the funding aspect, but it's also what's going on outside the home and how do we best help our parents in that particular space.
Kevin Higgins, I'll get to your question here in a matter of moments. Thank you for the question. More questions are coming in very quickly here. Does he think, this is a follow-up question from another mom, and I appreciate this comment from Katie. Does he think the school board has done a good job to this point? And she also wants to know your stance on collective bargaining.
I'm 100% for collective bargaining. I was there standing with teachers, trying to be in the background at the second meeting. Do I believe the ACPS has done a good job? I think I'm challenged to say that they have. I think that let's take, for instance, there was a vote with regard to name change. It doesn't matter, what side of the avenue you're on, but 84 to 90% of the constituents said, this is what we want. ACPS says, no, this is what we're going to do. So and the fallback was, well, this policy said this is what we have to do. So if you draft a policy that says I don't have to listen to constituents in the future, that's problematic. I think that's the same thing if we look at Virginia getting out of the regional greenhouse gas initiative. 88% of folk across the Commonwealth say that's a good thing that we should do. But we have an administration that says, we're not going to listen to that. When we get into the habit of not listening to constituents and not listening to folk to what their needs are, to what they're telling us, that's problematic. When we go into, let's take the SRO deal. Initially, it was said we're pulling SROs out because of they're ineffective and because the issue of discrimination.
School resource officers, policemen in schools.
Yes, and because of discrimination. We go into, and I believe that was time we had COVID for a couple of years, and then we come back in, and all of a sudden, the discrimination's gone, and they're effective. So those things you can't. Those you got to be honest with folk. I'm not. I'm just a straight shooter because I think that's what we have to do if we're going to solve problems. You got to get to, what are the challenges? What are the potential solutions? How do we implement those solutions and get things done? But you got to be honest with folks, straight up and down. And so I'm challenged to say that ACPS has done an effective job. I think if we go back and look at, where the kid was hazed at Elmore High School, those are
JV football locker room.
Correct. Those are all challenges. I wouldn't say that those are good things that ACPS should be proud of.
The guy's on point. Questions are coming in fast here. This is from David. He wants to know your stance on taking funding from public schools and giving it to parents to potentially allocate to private schools, should they choose.
So again, here in the 82nd, here in the 54th district, we are 80+% Democratic environment. Obviously, and I'm a product of public schools. I went through Venable, Walker, Buford, and CHS. I'm strongly in support of our public school teachers. I've got a fantastic education coming out of the public schools. So here in this particular district, I'm going to stick with the public schools. And I'm going to strongly support the public schools. And, that's where I stand on that. I know that there are other districts that, they may not feel the same way. But here for the 54th district, that's where we are, and that's what I'm going to support.
The intriguing thing about this race, and I think candidate Brown and candidate Norris have realized this, the school piece is very much front and center.
Yes.
And candidate Coulson, in some cases, depending on who you ask, may have messed this up. May have messed this up when it came to the collective bargaining, when months ago, maybe she gave indications she wasn't very much in favor.
Sure.
A lot of folks think candidate Coulson, especially within the teacher, stakeholder, Forward Albemarle lobbying group,
yes,
think candidate Coulson has slowed collective bargaining.
Sure.
And one of the reasons ACPS does not have it
yes,
is perhaps because of candidate Coulson. It would seem from a strategy standpoint, a political science standpoint, and you're one of the best at political science. We got a Batten Institute guy here. It would seem like Sorensen Institute.
Yeah.
I apologize.
Yeah.
It would seem like schools in this track record is an opportunity for not only you and candidate Norris.
Yeah. Well, so again, this is from the state level, but we got to rely on the folk who are the experts in their job, and these are the teachers, these are the staff, these administrators here, and let them do their job effectively. It should have been a no-brainer to move collective bargaining forward.
Especially when Charlottesville schools are doing it.
Yeah.
There's this invisible line that nobody knows,
yeah,
where the teachers and the faculty and the staff within Charlottesville Public Schools are going to have this opportunity, yeah, and this leverage.
Yes.
ACPS, if they don't do it,
yeah,
folks are going to be sprinting from ACPS across the invisible line to work there.
Yeah, and here's the thing. So in 2021, the Police Oversight Board got an ordinance from got statute from the General Assembly that allowed us to have an oversight board here locally. At that same time, that's when collective bargaining was presented across from the General Assembly as well. And there was a study that was done that said that it positively affects students, teachers, and staff, and it should be done. At this point, I believe we're up to 8 or so localities, maybe more, who've already adopted it. CPS is in the process of finalizing it, but yeah, absolutely. ACPS is well behind the curve, and when you want to talk about women's rights and what have you, I believe it's 80+% of teachers are women. And when so how can you champion or cry you're championing women's rights, but then deny collective bargaining to a union of 80+% women? That doesn't seem to jive well with me.
Questions. Kevin Higgins in Greenwood, a thriving suburb of Crozet. He says, outside of family and friends, who are the people that have influenced your life, candidate Brown? It's a good question.
Yeah. So obviously, for me, I'm a person of faith. As I said, I wasn't planning on getting in this race. I didn't want to get in this race. I had some other goals that I wanted to do, but it was that faith aspect that led me here. It said, this is what you're going to do at this point in time. So I would say, faith is a big issue, and it's not. People under this day and age, they look at Christianity, they look at faith, and they're turned off by it because I think it's the way it's presented is in a light that doesn't respect other folk, and that's not it at all. We're supposed to love our neighbors as we love ourselves. We're supposed to, what does it say? And this is Brian Stevenson. We're supposed to do justice, walk, love mercy, and walk humbly, and that's what it's about. We're about serving others, and that's what all of this boils down to me. So I would say, absolutely, faith is a big part. What Matthew McConaughey had this deal where he says, somebody asked him a question, who do you look up to? And I believe his answer was me 5 years from now, me 10 years from now. And I think that is a very poignant statement, because when I look at the changes, even in this race, from the start to where we are now, it takes a lot. It changes a lot, and you grow up a lot pretty quickly. And so when I look at the struggles that I've been through, grew up here in poverty, didn't have means, had to go through, had to serve in the U.S. Marine Corps to get college funding, had to navigate that whole space, first generation college kid, had to go out here, suffer setbacks in terms of navigating the space from how do we transition from poverty to not being in poverty. Those are all hard cycles. The spaces where I'm alone and things aren't necessarily going well, and you got to fight through that. So it's not meant to be an arrogant space, but it's meant to be an understanding of what I've been through and the struggles that I've been through, and I'm quite proud of myself, for that. So, yeah,
That's a damn good answer.
Well, it's true.
That was seriously good.
That's what it is. I don't Jerry. You know me.
Yeah.
I'm not here for BS.
Yeah, this dude's authentic. I know for a fact he's authentic. I've known this guy, been interviewing this guy since 2019. This guy's what you see is what you get.
100%. 100%. And I'm just here to serve our district, serve our community, serve the Commonwealth of Virginia to the best of my ability.
Lisa Costello on Cherry Avenue. I love Bellamy Brown's work and what he's all about. She makes a suggestion about considering accessible playgrounds for all children, including children that are disabled, her son disabled.
Yeah.
So she's highlighting that.
Yeah.
Carly Wagner is watching the program.
Yeah.
She has this question for you. What are candidate Brown's thoughts on school choice, where funds follow the student? I know a big argument against it is that it would only help affluent students, but I don't buy it. If it's implemented correctly, it could work. She also says maybe the funds are graduated based on household income. Over 200,000 families get nothing. Poverty line and below get 1.5% per pupil, something along those lines. So she wants to know, a lot of people are asking this question. Sure. Funding for public schools and maybe having that funding go to parents for choice.
Mm-hmm. So I want to go back to Lisa Costello's statement for a little bit. So yeah, absolutely right. And I don't, this is a political space, and so I don't try to mix, some of the things that I do outside of it, but I am a board member of Bennett's Village, and we're working hard to bring an all disabilities or all abilities playground here locally to Penn Park. Yuka Weaver, Kara McClurkin, and a bunch of other ladies who are doing some great work there. And so, we want to definitely get that done because it's needed. Again, we're looking at how do we serve our entire district. Again, with the school choice question, again, I'm in support of our public school teachers, our public school students, and our public school staff. I'm not closed off to hearing different perspectives or points of view, but that's where I find a lot of value. We were having a conversation last night actually, and somebody was pointing out that a lot of the folk that go to Stab, go to Miller, Tandem, and some of these other schools, these are wealthy folk who have the opportunity to go there. I know that there are some kids who aren't wealthy who get scholarships there, and they get great educations. But I also know that kids get great educations within Charlottesville public schools as well. And we have to champion that. We have to bring value to that because everybody can't necessarily afford those spaces. And that's where I stand strongly in support of our public schools.
Vanessa Parkhill in Earlysville has a question, which I'll get to in a matter of moments. A lot of folks watching you here, Candidate Brown. Here's Vanessa's. Does collective bargaining in Albemarle mean by default they will become part of the National Teacher Union? This is the union that resisted return to in-person instruction during COVID. The union acts in the best interest of their members, which sometimes benefits students, but sometimes does not. Teachers, like all employees, deserve fair, competitive compensation and safe workplaces, union or not. Any thoughts on that one?
So I don't know the inner workings of what in this particular case, the Albemarle Education Association, would be doing. I only know what's here on the ground.
Okay.
I've got a teacher who taught me at Buford long time ago, who's now a teacher over in the Albemarle County Public School Systems. I know you talk about Johnny Ornelas and Philadelphia Soto. I've spoken to these folks. These are good people, and we have to support them in what they do because it has a direct bearing on the education for our kids. I know that there is a debate about school choice and what have you, but again, in this particular district, in the 54th district, a strongly 80+% Democratic district, we're going to support public schools.
I like it. I got to ask you about HD 55.
Sure.
Kellen Squire, Amy Laufer, two Democrats.
Yeah.
As of probably like 3.5 weeks ago, I think they might have been friends.
Yeah.
I don't know how they recover from this.
Yeah.
Laufer sends out, couple of mailers and some statements basically saying Kellen Squire is against abortion. To Laufer's credit, and I think Laufer has committed a number of blunders in this campaign, but Laufer said, look, Squire did this. And then yesterday, Squire's hosting a press conference at the Northside Library with a bunch of electeds behind him, and he finally says, look, I made a mistake, I screwed up. After 3 or 4 chances of making excuses like this was a strategic behind the scenes operation to try to trick the Republicans. And then he also made the statement of, I was trying to reclaim the brand of pro-choice or pro-life or whatever it was. Mm-hmm. And a lot of lame excuses, I thought, from Squire at first, till yesterday, finally, him saying it was a mistake. Mm-hmm. I think Laufer has a lot of culpability here. How about open-ended, anywhere you want to go on this, and then I'll unpack some specific questions. So here's my thing, and this is my understanding from talking to folk and strong supporters of Mr. Squire. He said he's already mentioned this several years ago when it happened. He's already came out and said it. He's having to do it again. I think, again, obviously have a politics background, political science, and the whole nine. I think there are absolutely some significant initial challenges and blunders from a new politician trying to get out there and so it's a rookie making some mistakes initially?
I would say that that's part of it. I would say that, from my understanding, he has grassroots folk. It's a band of different people. And perhaps the messaging, could have been different. But everybody knows people. Everybody knows each other in the 55th district and the 54th district. We all know each other.
Yeah.
Coming out of the gate, it was already stated. This is, and quite frankly, Amy could have won this without doing that.
I'm surprised she did this. I think she was the favorite prior 100%. To doing these mailers,
100%.
And now it's a toss-up. This was a strategic error.
She would have won hands down.
100%.
And The reasoning behind it, I don't know. But I know that for me, if I were to be elected and to see this, I would have challenges in the trust department in this particular
That's what I was
space.
going to ask you.
Yes.
Can you trust any of these candidates now? If you win, you may be working, if you win, the odds are you're going to be working alongside Laufer or Squire.
Yes.
We are hearing scuttlebutt that Steve Harvey's about to jump in the race as an R.
Okay.
We also are hearing scuttlebutt that Denver Riggleman is very much considering jumping in this race.
Okay.
If Riggleman jumps in this race, that guy's probably going to win it. Steve Harvey, friend of the program's come on the show here. If he runs as an R, that's going to be extremely challenging in a district that's very, very blue. Okay,
Mm-hmm.
and Steve knows that here. Could you trust either Squire or Laufer if you win this race and work alongside them in the House?
So I went back and I read what is it, the Daily Cause or whatever it
Yeah,
was.
his blog, the initial blog that got him in heat.
Yes. So I went back and I read it. And you got to read the entire thing.
Right, for context.
You got to
I
read
read
the
that
entire
too.
thing.
Yeah.
And this is a deliberate move to cherry pick a section and to put it out there and to present a narrative that you know is false.
But is that politics?
Again, you said earlier, this is a local race.
Okay.
We all know each other in this race.
100%. 100%.
We know each other's background. We've been vetted good and bad.
Okay?
You know, and politics or not, if you're going to deliberately try and mislead voters and cherry pick a section to win a race that you already likely were going to run anyway, that's a challenge for me. So I would be more inclined to work with Kellen than to trust Ms. Laufer if she were to win out, which she still may.
Yeah.
And you have to have working relationships within the General Assembly to be able to get things done. It's not to say that, again, if I were elected and she were elected, that we can find ways to do work on behalf of our space. But I'm pretty confident that I would be concerned about whether or not she would try to undermine me.
Whether she's being authentic or disingenuous.
However it is.
Okay. And the follow-up question is, and I'm choosing my words carefully, some of the stuff that maybe one of your competitors has done in this race, Ms. Coulson, does that fall in a category
Of misleading
like this?
voters?
Yes. That's what I want to ask. That's a very pointed question.
Yeah, that's what I said. It's not as...
Is it the same?
It's not as egregious.
Okay.
But you're still misleading voters.
Okay.
You're still misleading voters, and that is a problem. That's a problem. You know, again, Republican, Democrat, across the board, they don't want George Santos type leaders. You know, they want folk that's going to give it to them straight, get the job done, work in their best interests, and go from there. There's no point. I mean, the credentials are solid, the whole nine. There's no point to mislead voters in this particular race or any race.
What do you make of a 2023 tactic or strategy of music festivals for campaigns? There's one this Saturday.
Sure.
Yeah.
Everybody's entitled to their own methodology for how they're going to get their messaging out for the voters. I'm going to concentrate on mine.
Okay.
I think it's effective. I think the voters are responding well to it, and that's what I'm going to continue to focus on. There are different methodologies. Mine is to really get out there and talk to, pound the pavement, talk to folk, find out what their concerns are, and be able to, come up with some ideas to be able to address those concerns.
Sally Hudson versus Creed Deeds, State Senate. Sally
Sure.
taking on an institution. Sally obviously has name recognition. Sally's come on the show multiple times. Creed Deeds, an icon. What do you make of that race?
So, I mean, I've already come out and I've said, that I'm in support of Creed Deeds. I believe that where he stands right now, this is one of the challenges, and I'll say this publicly, and this is not me speaking for their campaign. This is me speaking for my observation. There's a narrative out there that Cree or Senator Deeds is arguing seniority, and that has turned off some of the younger voters.
The narrative is that Senator Deeds is got the institutional memory, and because of his time in the Senate, he's able to get stuff done faster because of that institutional memory. And the narrative is Sally should have waited her turn, and she did not.
Well, I want to clarify that first.
Okay.
So there's this narrative that he's got seniority, but there's the other part that's not really translating to the younger audience and what that means.
Okay.
The General Assembly is an institution that is driven on seniority and relationships. In this particular space, with the number of resignations from the General Assembly, Senator Deeds has moved up. He's on the Senate Judiciary Committee. He's on the Senate Finance Committee and some other important committees that we, quite frankly, need at this point in time. I got a guy that I went to law school with over in the 53rd District, Tim Griffin. Tim, if you're watching, it is what it is. But they're going to come. He's a Republican. He's got the seat. That's already done. He's already come out and said that he's going to, bring some attacks, against Democrats, against abortion, gun rights, the whole nine. We need someone who has the leadership, who has the relationships on, in the General Assembly to be able to fight against that. And so that's why, from a practical perspective, I support Senator Deeds. There's nothing with regard to slight against, Sally. But that's my perspective there. I hear I got relationships in the General Assembly, got relationships here in the district, and that's where a lot of it goes for a lot of folk. Senator Deeds has done a lot of work. You look at some of the endorsements that he's got across the board. They're not giving these endorsements lightly. These are relationships that have been built over time. Those are relationships that we're going to need within the General Assembly to represent our area, to defend reproductive freedom, to defend some of these challenges, other challenges that are, that we'll quite frankly face.
Another race, as we wind down, that I know you're watching closely is the City Council race.
Sure.
Charlottesville, what do we got? 3 seats up for grabs. Sina McGill stepped down in the middle of her term. She's not running. Lloyd Snook running again. Michael Payne running again. And you got some 2 newcomers, Mr. Cooper, Ms. Oshrin running, and Bob Fenwick back in the mix again. This is a race that I think you potentially could have dominated. Legitimately, I've said that on the show many times. I think he would have won this race. What do you make of 2023 Charlottesville City Council? Who would you like to see potentially get elected in those 3 spots? And
Sure.
What do we need to know about this race that people are not focusing upon?
So I know some. I don't know all about the race. I've already voted for the folk, and I've already told them, that I voted for them, who I would like to see in this particular in those seats. I've been day in and day out grinding on the 54th race and what I got to do, and so I haven't really. I'll leave that up to the candidates to make their case. I will say that I am.
Can I ask who you voted for? Is that allowed? You don't. That's a very pointed question. You could say no. It's private business, and I wouldn't feel.
Well, I will say I will tell you one of the 3 that I voted for. The other 2 already know. So I did vote for Deshad Cooper.
Okay.
And
the youngest one in the race, I believe, he's 28. Maybe Natalie's a little younger.
I'm not sure. I'm not sure the ages.
Okay.
And I hope that you can galvanize the support to get out there and place him in that seat. But yeah, that's the only one that I will say publicly that I've supported and voted for.
What's the most important issues here in that race?
So
is it gun violence?
Yeah, that's part of it. But what I'm also hearing is that when we're talking about the zoning code and the implementation of that, or it's getting pushed back, we also have to think about the infrastructure and the transit space and what's going on there, because those, when I ran in 2019, I believe we were still at 1 hour waits for bus and transit and the whole nine. And I was, speaking to someone yesterday. They were saying, how that affects folk when they're trying to get mental health services, when they're trying to get jobs, when they're, trying to navigate this life. And most of those folk are low-income folk. So it's, it provides a significant challenge, for them in that particular space. So I believe that council has to figure out how we're going to navigate this transit space as we're bringing in more folk into the city. So yeah, obviously, we still have to champion opportunities that get our kids out of these, gun violence spaces, and we have to be real about that. I spoke to another voter or another constituent who was like, a lot of folk around here with regard to the black community, it's been a lot of lip service. They'll say, yeah, we'll do something, but then, pull back and then do something completely different.
I've seen that as well.
And that's part of the reason why I want to galvanize black political power here, so that we can really, move some of these things forward. But those are I would say those are the things that I've been hearing. And there's a guy, and when I knocked on the door, he wasn't there. His wife was there. We had an extensive conversation just about the gang violence. This is a white couple. They've adopted an African-American kid. And there's another white couple out in Albemarle County, adopted an African-American kid, and they both wanted me to come in and speak with the kid or what have you, just to see that example. And I think that's a big thing in and of itself. When we're talking about, a lot of these young black men out here, seeing someone in this particular role could, be a role model, for them. But going back to this gentleman, he told me I'd spoken with his wife, and what have you. This was at the Moms Demand Action deal over at Red Row, and he very pointed me, a military guy, shook my hand. He was like, "Bellamy, don't worry about the veterans. Worry about these kids who are out there, in these spaces where gun violence is going on. Worry about these kids about, with regard to schooling and the whole nine." And it really stuck with me because I think those are genuine concerns across the board. And when we're looking at our district as a whole, a lot of the challenges that we face are in the black community space. And so I forget what the question was, but we have to really work at that to bring the community up as a whole.
Last question. Tell the viewers why they should vote for you.
Sure. I mean, I've demonstrated, that I'm a leader. I've demonstrated that I act in the best interest of our community, of our district, even as a volunteer. Wasn't paid at all, and I will continue to do that, going forward. I know that. I have the capabilities to build relationships across the board, Republican, Independent, and Democrat, so we can get stuff done, whether we're in the majority or in the minority. And I believe I've demonstrated the leadership to earn the vote and the confidence of voters here in the 54th district.
Let them know the website.
Yes.
And how they can donate.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. So the website is Bellamy Brown for Delegate, BELLAMY for delegate.com. You can also donate going to Act Blue and typing in my name, Bellamy Brown. But also, we'd like folk to, again, this is grassroots. We like folk, if you like what our campaign is about and you're willing to knock on doors, got a lot of palm cards to be put out, and then also the day of the GoTV. If we can get volunteers to go to the precincts and hand out literature, I think those are the greatest needs at this point. And I think that we can close this out and get some sound leadership across the board for our district. I'm not someone who's looking to mislead voters. I'm going to tell you what it is straight up so that we can solve problems effectively.
There it is, guys. 12 days away. 12 days from the primary. For a political junkie like myself, this is like my favorite time of year. I got races everywhere that I'm following so closely with a lot of great people in the races. I want to close with this. The folks that are running for these races are the people we see in the grocery stores and around the downtown mall and restaurants. While some of these races have gotten pretty nasty, if we could all remember that these are literally people we're going to see after these races are over. So the nastiness you say, you're going to probably be held accountable for at one time because you're going to see these people around town.
Yeah.
These are everyday people, guys.
Yes. And go back.
They're not pro politicians here.
And back to my comment or the Facebook comment where I said it's going to be awkward. It is going to be awkward.
Yeah.
Because
she was the chairwoman. I mean, we
these are relationships.
Yeah.
I already know there's so many people who are hurt by these actions, and then you've got this space where you're setting up camps. Why? It's unnecessary.
I agree.
For someone who's likely going to win anyway.
Right. Bellamy Brown, guys. He crushed it. Judah, did he not crush it? Absolutely amazing right there. That's the show. We hope you enjoyed it as much as we did. We'll talk about the interview we had with candidate Brown tomorrow on the I Love CVille show. 12 days away from state Senate primary, 2 district in the House delegates, races that matter, and city council and board of supervisors. Get ready, folks. Giddy up and get ready. Thank you kindly for joining us. My name is Jerry Miller for Bellamy Brown and Judah Woodcower. This is the I Love CVille show. So long. Dude, that was awesome. He's going to tell us when the mic is over and when the mic is off.